Joining me right now is Andy Davis from Trig Avionics. And Andy, it's always a pleasure to see you, and you've always got good stuff to talk about. But I want to start kind of at the 30,000 foot level, because we're talking about getting people to get ADS-B in their airplanes, and it's not maybe going quite as quickly as some in at least official Washington might hope.
Yeah, it's not going too badly though. I mean, you mentioned 30,000 feet. There's about 31,000 airplanes equipped in the national airspace, which is, depends how you count the stats as to what proportion of the people that is. There are different numbers of how many airplanes need to be equipped. Some people say 160,000 total, but there's quite a lot of people that would be exempt for one reason or another. So maybe it's going to be 120, 130,000. There's about 31,000 out there at the moment, and new installs are going in at more than 1,000 a month. So it's a pretty good rate. In fact, we did the simple calculation the other day, and if it keeps going at the current rate and nothing changes, it'll be about 70,000 airplanes equipped by the deadline. That's not perhaps the number that the FAA wanted to hear, but it's a good chunk of the fleet.
But what happens then to those pilots who aren't equipped by the deadline?
Well, not everybody needs to be equipped, depending on where your operation is based and where you're flying. If you're out in the Midwest, out somewhere away from the Class B airspace, where there's plenty of flying to be done outside at any mandate airspace, because it's an airspace rule. 91.225 is all about the airspace where you have to carry the equipment, not just saying everybody has to have it. So if you're out there, you can carry on your flying without ever having to equip with ADS-B. One of the things is, actually, people don't really know what the demographic is, if you like, as to where everybody is. So we're not quite sure how many people really need to do the installation.
Well, that is, of course, where I learned to fly as well. So, yes, there's a lot of uncontrolled airspace out in the heartland of this country. But what about in the European market? Because I know that you deal with that as well. Is there that kind of uncontrolled airspace where people can fly? Absolutely. And I know they've got a different standard, but they've also have an equipage deadline.
That's correct. Although the equipage mandate in Europe is quite different. The technical standards are aligned. So EASA and the FAA have worked together. So the new technical standard for ADS-B in Europe is pretty much completely aligned with what's required over here. What's different is the airspace where you need the equipment. For normal, particularly VFR pilots, the amount of sky where you are going to need equipage is much smaller than it is over here. Here there is the mode C veils, there is anything above 10,000 feet. In Europe it's much more constrained to Class A airspace, and certain zones around particular airports are much more narrowly defined. So although we expect air carriers and some of the higher end biz jets, IFR guys to need the equipment, there's a lot less demand at the lower end for the piston singles and twins.
Something that I've been talking about with several of the avionics guys that have come over and talked with us today is how your customers are approaching you now. Because at one point it was, they were, I'm sure, coming to your booth and others and saying, what do I need? And now I'm hearing that people are coming and saying, here's what I want, do you have that? Are you finding that to be the case as well?
Sometimes, yes. There are people who have a particular view as to what they want. Sometimes that's it's a good view, and sometimes it's gleaned from snippets of information, and they still need steered in the right direction as to what they should really be doing. What you actually need to comply is pretty straightforward. You just need an ADS-B out solution. What some people are choosing to do is either rearrange their panel for completely unrelated issues. Some people are saying, well, if my shop's in having worked on, maybe I'll get some glass, maybe I'll get a PFD installed. But one thing that it is forcing is GPS equipage. In order to comply with the full mandate, you do need to have some kind of WAS GPS receiver on board. Now, a lot of guys are lucky they've already got one. If you have and to take the obvious example, a Garmin 430, something like that, if you have the WAS version of that, that is a competent navigator and also counts as an ADS-B position source. So if you already have that, you already have a good chunk of the solution on your airplane. You now need something to transmit the ADS-B out, which typically is going to be an upgrade to your transponder. Wire the two together, a couple of other things you need to sort out, some testing, and that's a solution. So that can be really quite effective and done. If, however, you don't have anything in your panel already, you have no navigator, question we ask people is, well, maybe now's the time. Have you thought about getting one? Because if you imagined you might be going to buy a navigator for your airplane sometime in the next 2 or 3 years, then the ADS-B mandate really is going to be the thing that triggers that. So again, people are doing quite significant upgrades that are not really related to just the ADS-B solution.
Right. Now, one of the things, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was going to say, but if you still don't, or if you have something that isn't ADS-B capable, but you like it, it's an existing, I don't know, KLN 94 navigator, something like that. It's wired into your panel, into your autopilot, into your HSI, and you like it and you know how to work it. You know, some people say, I don't want to upgrade that. And so their third option is put some kind of remote mount separate wires navigator.
Now, Trig is well known for small, lightweight instruments that are all certified and all good to go, and yet you're seeing a lot of interest from the really light airplane market, and what you've brought today and what you've introduced here at AEA is for almost largely for the sailplane market. So let's talk about your new box here a little bit, Andy.
let me do that. I mean, so we've had this product for a while, which is a full-featured WAS GPS position source, which is completely compliant with the mandate. But there are a whole lot of people out there, and back to the statistics almost of who's going to equip, who are exempt for one reason or another. You can be exempt because you're in a sailplane, as you mentioned. They were exempt from the transponder rules, and they're exempt in much the same way from the ADS-B requirement. Balloons, same argument. And that's because they don't have the electrical system to support it. In fact, any aircraft with no electrical system is exempt from the ADS-B mandate. The other guy who's exempt, of course, is the guy who's away from the airspace completely. If you're out in Montana or whatever, there's nothing that is going to force you to do the upgrade. And yet, part of that community is looking to voluntarily equip. The sailplane guys in particular spoke many years ago to the FAA, in fact, and said, well, how can we participate? And the reason for that is, although they're exempt, they also have a sometimes even justified paranoia of being hit by somebody in a powered airplane because they behave differently, they dawdle, they're thermaling, they're hard to spot sometimes, and they like to think that they can have a conspicuity solution that lets them be seen. A full ADS-B out solution is expensive for them. May even be prohibitively expensive.
And they may not have the panel space for it.
And they may not have the panel space or the electricity to support it. But quite a lot of them are equipping with transponders and want to participate in the ADS-B solution. So the FAA worked with these guys and with industry and came up with a TSO called TSO C199, which is basically ADS-B for the less fully equipped.
Okay.
They deliberately didn't call it the same thing. They called it Traffic Awareness Beacon System. But underlying it is exactly the same ADS-B technology that is required for the 2020 mandate. But the alleviation to try and reduce the cost is it allows some slightly simpler certification. It's still a certified solution, so we're still talking about a TSO and a TSO transponder product, but it lets them get in at a slightly lower entry level. And we worked on that and came up with this product, which is our TN72 TABS GPS receiver.
Okay.
So very much like the original product that we had that gives you the full capability, it includes a full WAS GPS receiver. Connect that to your existing Trig transponder, or new Trig transponder. Sorry, had to get that one in.
Oh no, of course, and we have one here.
And here's an example of the control panel. But connect the TN72 to that transponder, and you can participate in the ADS-B out environment. Because it is a certified product, it actually lets the transponder set what is called the integrity values. So it sets a non-zero integrity level for the data. It sets a design assurance level. And that's important because that is required for any of the standards compliant traffic receivers to see you. If you look at some of the kind of equipment that's fitted to the light aircraft that the gliders want to be seen by, if it's TSO'd, then the regulations require it to discard low integrity data. And so, although there are solutions out there that have experimented with that, They don't show up on the simple traffic receivers. So put that into your airplane, and now you can be seen by the other traffic. Also importantly, it turns on the ground network. Okay. So we all know that one of the benefits of ADS-B here in the US is that you get uplinked traffic and other data from the ground network. But that uplinked data is only made available to participating aircraft. It's not just broadcast all the time to all of the sky just in case somebody's passing by. You have to turn it on by sending the right ADS-B messages. With one of these things connected to your transponder, you can turn on that traffic, and you get to see, so if you have a traffic receiver on board, you can see all the other participating traffic as well. And so that's a great safety benefit for someone that can therefore drive that what I'll call optional equipage. The ADS-B network does cover the whole of the continental US, even though the areas of concentrated Class B and mandate airspace are more focused. Even out in the places where you're hundreds of miles away, there is still ADS-B coverage, there's still ADS-B uplink, and therefore that gives a real benefit for someone if they put something like that in their aircraft.
When we talk about ADS-B and the way that it allows the airplane and the electronics to communicate with things like iPads and smartphones and things of that nature, and I know there's a lot of that going on in that whole connected cockpit scenario.
Yep.
Where do we go? And we're going to talk blue sky here a little bit, Andy, because it's really, I enjoy the opportunity to kind of sit with you guys and look out into the future. But where do we get to a point where the boxes talk to one another in the individual airplanes, where the airplanes basically talk to one another?
Well, that's already happening at the very high end. It's not happening in GA, but it's happening in the Part 121 stuff. A couple of the ADS-B applications. So ADS-B is a technology, and then they put applications on top of that. One of the applications that GA pilots are aware of is basic situational awareness, visual acquisition, helping you see the other guy. So you have a display, as you say, and you say, yep, there's the traffic over there. But there are other things that are being worked on. One very good example is what's called in-trail procedures. So for this, you have to think of airliners crossing the North Atlantic. One thing that people forget, because we're in such a connected world, is that there is a portion of every flight between Europe and the US where the airliner is out of contact with ground radar, because there's no ground, and so there's no ground radar system. And so for all time, the North Atlantic tracks, you are out of surveillance from ATC. So ATC can't give you a clearance to climb, descend through somebody else's oncoming track. They now have a ADS-B application called In-Trail Procedures, ITP, which allows appropriately equipped aircraft, so this is aircraft with ADS-B out and ADS-B in, to identify the conflicting traffic, and solely on the basis of the two airplanes managing their relative position, you can do climbing and descending to change tracks in the North Atlantic without needing an ATC, a direct ATC clearance, or rather without needing the controller to actually manage you as you climb and descend. So that's one great example. There are other ones coming along where there will be ADS-B enabled applications. So and a lot of these involve panel-mounted avionics rather than an iPad, but selecting an aircraft, coupling your autopilot and saying, essentially, follow that guy. And the airplanes already have the technology to do that. UPS have been doing experiments in that area. Again, it's all in the larger air carrier type aircraft rather than light aircraft. I see a lot of this stuff trickling down. Soon we will be able to just pick out an airplane and say, yeah, follow him, engage the autopilot, just as you can couple it to the nav or couple it to an ILS. Maybe you'll have auto follow. Just press the button, identify, yeah, follow him, go.
Well, that technology already exists in the drone world, where they have drones that will follow around and
come back to me or
come back or whatever. So that technology exists at that level, and then I guess at the very high level, we've got to get it into the middle range here somehow.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit more about your stuff, because I know that you take a lot of pride in the fact that you are a company that offers a really cost-effective product, that is a product that somebody can put in their airplane. It saves a lot of weight. It's not a big, heavy, bulky thing. Easy to install. So how are you seeing your install base at this point? Are you getting the kind of market share that you're looking for? And is that install base mostly in that light aircraft market?
Certainly, to the second one, yeah, it's all in the lighter end at the moment. We have some applications where we get up as far as, shall we say, a King Air, something like that. But the vast majority of what we're doing is in the single engine piston and in the light sport guys, and all the way down to the ultralights. You're right that our a small transponder is sufficiently small and light that a flex wing ultralight can happily install the Trig transponder and can then fly in the mandate airspace. So that enables us all the way down. As to market share, well, I'm not sure.
Nobody ever has enough market share.
Yeah, I'd like more if that's okay. I'd like more people to recognise the benefits of the Trig products and choose us. But we're doing okay.
So when you talk to people, kind of give us your pitch. I mean, when you say you're considering several things, tell me why I should come to Trig and put that in my airplane.
Well, so sticking with the transponders, we have two to choose from. Basically, one is our compact mount, which is the thing that has this kind of little controller. It has a remote mount gold box, not dissimilar to this one at the front, which has the brains of the transponder. And so for anybody who has a space constraint, maybe limited panel space or limited panel depth, because the control means it takes almost no space, that is the popular choice for them. And this part is used by some of the aircraft OEMs as well. Built into anything from some of the Cub Crafters types up to Icon A5s, because it's small, compact, doesn't take up much panel space. Funnily enough, at the other end, the people who also like the very compact one are some of the vintage types, including some of the Warbirds, because you can kind of hide it. And so if you have a classic panel and it's supposed to look like something from the 1940s, exactly. Then it kind of spoils it if you put a big transponder in the little panel. So put one of these, tuck it out of the way. Pilot can still operate it, still perfectly usable, but it doesn't interfere with the look of a vintage type. So that's the compact transponder. The other transponder, I don't have one here, but it's a conventional panel mount Mark width transponder, 6 1/4 inches wide, and it has the great feature that it is plugged straight into a legacy KT76A tray. So using the existing tray, you can put the transponder in, same wiring, same connections at the back. You obviously need to add a wire for your GPS input, and you have to do something about what's called automatic air ground determination, which is a bit of a hot button at the moment with the FAA, because too many airplanes are getting it wrong. But wire that up, and you have again, it's what I might even call an entry-level compliance solution. So you can add bells and whistles, you can add receivers and displays and things, but for the basic compliance solution, that is extremely straightforward to install. It doesn't involve a lot of rewire. And one of the big costs in ADS-B upgrades is, of course, the installation cost. It isn't completely straightforward. You do have to file all the paperwork. You do have to have the flight manual supplements. You do have to do rewiring as necessary. And some of the rewires are get you more features, but can be a really quite expensive way to go. So we're really trying to make it relatively inexpensive for people to do that upgrade.
For those shops that might be watching, what are some of the pitfalls that you're finding where they go to make these installations and they might not be doing them quite correctly?
I'm not sure that it's maybe unfair to the shops to say not doing them correctly. The one that is a hot topic at the moment is, as I mentioned, air ground determination. One thing that maybe not everybody knows is that an ADS-B installation has to know whether it's flying or on the airport surface. And that's because ADS-B transmissions are different when you're flying to when you're on the airport surface. The FAA is keen that the airport surface component of the system works because it's part of their future plans for avoiding runway incursions, management of taxiways, all that kind of stuff. And so the airplane has to know it's on the ground. For a large airliner, that's easy. They have multiple squat switches, pressure systems, all this stuff, and they know perfectly well that they're on the ground. For a light airplane, it's less obvious whether you're on the ground. And so there are a number of solutions from the vendors. We use solutions based on either air data computer, if you're fortunate to have one, or an airspeed switch, or other systems based around that. You set all of that up and you do the testing, and now you have an airplane that knows the difference between being in the air or on the ground. The only catch is that when they then get fielded and given back to the owners and they fly away, they get that wrong. One of the theories as to why they get that wrong is that in order to do the final checkout, the installer has to do a ramp check. If the airplane thinks it's on the ground, it disables a number of the transponder functions and your ramp test doesn't work. So the guys know perfectly well how that goes. They go over to the airplane, they either disable the squat switch or change the settings and turn off the air-ground determination, and then they walk back out, do the ramp check, and now it passes. And then they fill in the paperwork and they go back to the office and fill in the logbooks.
And they don't turn it back on.
And then the owner shows up and says, is it ready? Can I have the key? And he goes out and flies away and it hasn't been turned back on. So if any of our dealers are watching, the number one thing after you've done the ramp check, please remember, turn back on the squat switch.
And I think that's a great place to leave it, Andy. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Nice
Thank you
speaking to
so
you.
much. It's always interesting, and hope you're having a great show here at AEA.
Oh,
and
so far so good.
so far, every time I've been by your booth, you've had people there. So
Yep.
I've been very gratified to see that for you. So thanks very much.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
Aero-News Network's coverage of the 60th Annual AEA International Convention and Trade Show, live from New Orleans, is brought to you in part by the following sponsors.
Have you ever wanted big glass in your cockpit but didn't have the space? Now with Avidyne's IFD series, touchscreen GPS navigators, and our new IFD 100 iPad app, having big glass in your cockpit is finally within reach.
Southeast Aerospace teamed up with Garmin International, Gables Engineering, and Peregrine Avionics to bring the most cost-effective and flexible ADS-B solution to the business aviation community. Our Part 25 AML STC is available for non-TCAS 2 Beechjet, Citation, Hawker, Learjet, and Falcon Jet. Visit seaerospace.com for more details.